Hello, and welcome to our first ever in-person Earth Report. I'd like to talk to you today a little bit about what we do and why we do it as far as these Earth reports. And then I'll explain a little bit of the behind the scenes on our Earth reports. I'd like to thank all of you who've been following us. I'd like to encourage you to go ahead and click like and feel free to share us. Now, back to what we're doing here. First of all, a lot of you might wonder why we have all of those Earth reports on there. There's three main things that we study when we do our Earth reports. Number one is volcanoes, number two is earthquakes, and number three are sunspots and geomagnetic storms. Let me explain to you a little bit about why these are important, especially to overlanders. First of all, our volcanoes. This week we have a fine example over here in Alaska. Mount Spur is going into a yellow warning. They've had a couple of earthquakes. They had one yesterday. It was a 4.1. And you can find this information at the Alaska Volcano Observatory. The reason that this is important is that we have a lot of overlanders that do expeditions in Alaska. Only the very brave might be doing it this time of year. But it's still important to stay in touch with the Earth reports. Now, the Anchorage Daily News actually has some really good pointers, especially for those who are overlanding in Alaska right now. One of their main things is make sure your car has good air filters and oil filters. Wear masks if there's a lot of soot out of the eruption. And in extreme cases, if it was actually to erupt, you'd want to have like plastic sheeting and tape to go around the edges of like your tent or your cabin or your trailer or whatever you have while the eruption's going on. You don't want to seal it off. Just make sure that you have like a sheathing, a protection over those areas. Another thing that we cover on Earth reports is we also cover earthquakes, and that's important because Burma just happened to have a really serious earthquake a couple of weeks ago. And when that happens, it cuts off roads and routes. We do actually have one or two people that travel across Asia on overlanding, and things like that is important. Major cities have important resources such as gas and water and food supplies, and if they're affected by an earthquake, or if they're in a region that's affected by an earthquake, it's going to be harder to get those things, even if you were to have it delivered through a delivery service or something. And last but not least, we also feature geomagnetic storms on Earth reports. I don't usually do an Earth report every day on those because there's a difference between an actual solar flare and a geomagnetic storm. We may get solar flares off and on a day-to-day basis, but if you get if you get an eruption that can cause a geomagnetic storm, well, that's going to affect your satellite systems. And a lot of overlanders communicate through satellite. So that's kind of why we do those things. It's important to anyone who's doing any overlanding, anyone who's out there doing like the expeditions and stuff on weekends, or even if you're just out camping and you find that you're having trouble, with your satellite service. I know of a lot of RVers that use satellite service just for basic things like using their television and stuff. So the most important thing to remember is that you need to stay informed. If you're going to a specific area, like if you're doing an overlanding in Alaska or you're doing an expedition, check with the Alaska Volcano Observatory. I know of a lot of people that like to go in Oregon and Washington, also volcano hotspots. You check out, and that one would be the Cascades Volcano Observatory, and Yellowstone has an amazing one. That's an amazing place to be. So if you're out camping in these areas or overlanding or just doing a weekend expedition, be sure and find out what's going on in those areas before you go out. The U.S. Geological Survey has a lot of great information there on the areas that you might be camping at. And there's different places, different observatories all around the world where you can find out information on the local events that would affect you. So that's just kind of a brief overview of what we're doing here. That's why we do Earth reports. Sometimes I do have a live event. I'm going to be monitoring this volcano in Alaska. But other times I'm just putting on a simple report letting you know of the areas that are affected throughout the world in places where I know that there are people out there overlanding. So thanks for joining us. And this is kind of a background view of what we do and why we do it.